Pardon me. Good morning, everybody. This is the news that we are waking up to for Monday, December the 2nd, 2024, day 1013 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And the big news of, or no, I'm sorry, let's start with the overnight missile and drone attack, which was just a drone attack last night, thank God. On the night of December 2nd, 2024, the Russian Federation sent 110 UAV attack drones of the Shahed 131 136 class against the territory of Ukraine. 52 of those were shot down, intercepted by mobile fire groups, the Ukrainian Air Force, and other elements of the defense forces of Ukraine. Another 50 were lost to electronic warfare. Another 6 were returned to sender. I love it when they send them back to the territory of Russia, or in this case, Belarus, apparently. And 1 was still in the air at the time of this recording. So, assuming that the one that's still in the air gets through and is not taken out, that's 108 out of 110 intercepted, a 98% interception rate for the Ukrainian armed forces. Incredible. Now, the big news on the world stage, of course, is Syria and what's happening in Syria. And Bashar al Assad is in Moscow, apparently waiting to meet with Putin, because as far as I know, Putin is not in Moscow. So, last night I had it wrong when I said that Bashar had met with Putin already. That has apparently not happened or is just happening today. It is important to remember that this guy, Assad, with the help of this guy, Putin, took a country of 20 million people and did a carpet bombing campaign to eliminate all opposition that displaced half his population. He made 10 million people homeless. He killed 600,000 people. He imprisoned another 200,000 for daring to speak against him. That's half your population impoverished by homelessness and destruction, and nearly another 10% of it, another 5% of it killed or imprisoned on your watch. That's how you dealt with everything. That's who this guy is. This is the same guy who used chemical weapons against his own people, just like Saddam Hussein did. It is important to remember what it is we are dealing with when we are dealing with Bashar al-Assad. For their part, the Russians, of course, are interested in Syria because it gives them the Mediterranean naval base at Tartus. Additionally, they have military bases across the country with an airfield that lets them do these carpet bombing raids on behalf of the Assad regime. Just north of the Tartus port. By all reports, and specifically here, I'm quoting the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine, the Kremlin forces are suffering heavy losses inside of Syria. In fact, the Kremlin has fired General Sergei Kislyov, who was earlier dismissed from Ukraine for incompetence and sent to run everything in Syria. In his place is General Alexander Kryko, former commander of the Russian forces in Syria. So he knows the territory, he knows the players, and he's back on the job. It is said this is such a serious situation that it is said that the head of the Russian Navy, Admiral Alexander Moisev, is on the ground at the Tartus port, even as we speak. The rebel forces, for their part, here, I'll play you this video. This is how they're responding to the Russians in Syria. Arabalarla atlayıp tüfek gibi koştular burada. Allah'a hamdolsun. Onları rezil kılan, bizleri üstün kılan Rabbimize hamdolsun. Vel izzetu lillahi ve li And this is happening all over Aleppo right now. Aleppo, Idlib, and the 20 or so settlements that the Ukrainians have taken around the area. The Syrian rebels are showing off videos of captured Russian soldiers. And so not only are the Russians losing people, they're losing people to the enemy in the form of POWs that can be used against them. And when this all first started happening, one of the first things that the Kremlin propagandists and bots started saying was that Ukraine was behind it all. And I really didn't believe that was the case until today, when I read an interview with General Kirill Budanov, who's the head of the Military Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine. Now, according to him, the rebel forces that are currently on the move in Syria received training from Ukraine's GUR commits group on tactics, battlefield lessons learned in Ukraine, and drones. And then I remembered, wait a minute, I reported on this back in June when they hit an air base. And then again it was September 15th. They hit a military base just south of Aleppo where Russian drones and Russian drone operators were creating improvised improvised explosive devices, right? Remember that? So in fact, the Ukrainians from the GUR have been embedded with the Syrians for now at least 6 months. It almost looks like they've been waiting for this opportunity. And Budanov talks about this, where the Russians have withdrawn so many men and equipment, and then the Israelis have decimated Hezbollah, that now the rebels have a chance. They're not. The enemy is deprecated, and they're taking full advantage of it, boy. You can see here they've got captured jets, helicopters, and ammunition warehouses, on top of a $15 million Panzer A1 air defense. So now look, again, these rebels have an Islamist past. Yes, they broke from Al Qaeda in 2017. Yes, they are saying all the right things right now. They are saying that all civilians must be protected, including Christians and others, quote unquote, right? We can only hope that they have moderated their tone from those days with Al Qaeda. Otherwise, we're just looking at another jihadist regime that's going to persecute everybody that doesn't think the way that they do. Now, for their part, the Syrians are moving troops to the area. They are on the way. And so we can expect to see more violent clashes between these troops. It is important to recognize that they are only 80 miles from the airfield, the Himeni airfield that the Russians use, and about less than 100 miles from the Tartus naval base. Should Russia lose those, should Russia lose in Syria, this will be a major blow to their reputation. They already lost in Armenia. The world watched that, and the Kremlin impotent to do anything about it. It seems there was a lot of talk last night on the Telegram channels and around the internet that Putin had sent Bashir al-Assad home with nothing, that he wasn't going to be able to help him. We don't know that. Now that is all in question because it appears that the two have not yet met, that Assad is just waiting in Moscow for Putin to get back. This is, another ammunition warehouse in Syria, or another depot. And this one is loaded with equipment, vehicles, weapons, what look like anti-tank missiles, mortars, RPGs, artillery shells, right? So the Syrian rebels are now going to be able to use all of this Russian equipment against Russian forces in Syria, just like the Ukrainians use Russian equipment against Russians in Ukraine. The next big geopolitical happening, of course, is in Georgia. Georgia is a country of about a million plus people, and there are 200,000 people, almost 20% of the population of Georgia, in the streets of Tbilisi fighting with the police, and they really are fighting with them. Here we can take a look at police firing rubber bullets. While the people, somebody somewhere owns a fireworks factory, because these people seem to have unlimited supplies of bottle rockets and Roman candles, and that's what they're firing at the police, which are not particularly dangerous or deadly. You can see they've built barricades there. They may be using laser pointers to try to blind the police. This is happening right now on the streets of Tbilisi. 20% of the population out in the streets refusing to acknowledge the stolen election results. This kid's got a Roman candle. Now, here comes the bad part, because it's freezing in Tbilisi right now, right? And they're using water cannons on the people. That's a recipe for hypothermia. That's a recipe for pneumonia. That's a recipe for, for these guys not making it out of here. It's absolutely inhumane. It reminds me of the XL pipeline protests when private security companies turned water cannons on Americans there in sub-zero weather. This is a member of the opposition in the Georgian parliament. Listen to what he has to say.
Fighting only against oligarchs. No, we're fighting against Russian hybrid war here. They're investing and spending enormous amount of money. They are spreading disinformation. So help us.
And he's right. Right? The lawful government of Georgia is being subverted by the Russian Federation through hybrid warfare means, just as they meddled in the elections in Romania, in Moldova, and in the US. They are heavily meddling in the elections in Georgia, trying to sway everything away from a movement to the EU, which the people want, and back to staying under Moscow's thumb, which nobody wants. Nobody wants that. So we're going to watch Georgia, Syria. These are dominoes to watch, and we'll keep watching them. Now, for their part, the Russian propagandists, this is from Z Channel's Zapisky Veterana, which is run by a guy named Alex Kargopoltsev. They regularly advocate for the genocide of Ukrainians and have now suggested dropping aerial bombs on Georgia, right? No matter how cynical it may sound now, one conditional fab 1,500 against several hundred protesters is an acceptable price to pay to save hundreds of thousands of lives in the future. So if we kill a few of them now, we won't have to kill hundreds of thousands of them later to get our way. That's what he's saying. That's exactly what this son of a bitch is saying. And for his part, Medvedev is pretty much echoing this. He has referred to the president, the current president, who has refused to acknowledge the stolen election results, as expired, and has said that people like this used to be hanged from lampposts. It was a clear death threat against this person and against everyone who supports the legitimately elected government of Georgia. It appears that South Korea will not be providing weapons to Ukraine, despite Umarov's recent visit and his plea there. The South Korean government would have to change the law in order to export weapons to Ukraine. And it's unclear right now whether or not the political will exists to change the law or to make an exception, to write an addendum to the law to make an exception in the case of Ukraine. And the law basically states that South Korea will not participate in any active conflict. You can purchase weapons for your own defense when you are not at war, but you may not purchase their weapons if you are in a conflict. And that is the problem that currently exists in getting support from South Korea. Now, the South Koreans, for their part, expressed solidarity with Ukraine, stated their commitment to Ukraine as a sovereign nation whose sovereign territorial borders should be acknowledged, and said that they would continue to work with them to provide intelligence on North Korean movements, weapons shipments, and troops. But at this time, weapons appear to be off the table. Just to check in real quick. Now, look, we know we can expect the ruble to stay stable for the next 6 weeks because the Russians have closed the market for rubles, right? They're not trading in rubles with foreign exchange markets anymore. They're the only one doing it, really. And so they have eliminated all of the demand in the world for rubles. And so the price has stabilized. How long it will stay stabilized is anybody's guess. But given that they are supposed to re-enter international currency markets in about 6 weeks, I would expect that that's when the pent-up economic failures and pressures inside of Russia will see a destabilization period for the ruble again. The world is heating up, my friends. And it's exactly what we've said from the beginning of this conflict, that if we didn't deal with Putin immediately here in Ukraine, the mullahs in Iran and the Kim regime in North Korea would be emboldened. And they are. And the conflict, rather than diminishing in scope, is escalating. I heard somebody say something very interesting. It was Mark Galeotti, who's a Russia expert and military expert. And if I'm not mistaken, he sits in a professorship in London. And Mark Galeotti said this is not World War III. He said it is the first war in the period of globalization. And he went on to talk about the hybrid nature of the war and the attacks on like the DHL carrier, the undersea cables, as elements of that new global threat landscape of hybrid warfare. It was a good interview. It was out over the weekend on Times Radio. If I'm not mistaken, it was just posted yesterday on Sunday. So that's it for me for this morning. I will see everybody in the live tonight. Thanks.